Hey there, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking everything you sent over all those articles, the ringside notes, bits from interviews, and we're really gonna plunge deep into this recent Caleb Plant and Armando Resendiz fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And our mission here is pretty clear. Let's cut through all the noise, pull out the really crucial bits from these sources. We want to figure out what actually decided this fight, spotlight those moments that made you go, aha, and then we'll see what it all points towards for maybe a rematch and what's next for Plant right now.
And honestly, just looking through this material, the main story that kind of jumps out is really compelling, isn't it? It's about how the strategy, just relentless, smart pressure, how that managed to overcome some pretty clear skill advantages early on. It's a classic boxing dynamic, really, and these sources lay it out pretty well. So let's unpack it.
Let's do it.
So, okay, diving into these sources, how did things start? What was Caleb Plant trying to do right out of the gate, according to what we've got here?
Well, the sources make it pretty clear. Plant came out really intending to execute his trademark style, his bread and butter, as a couple of pieces call it.
Right.
Which means basically establishing his jab, using that lateral movement. He was trying to control the distance.
Keep him outside.
Exactly. Dictate the terms of the fight right from the opening bell. Use that reach advantage.
Makes sense.
And the notes from ringside actually mentioned his jab looked sharp early on. He used that movement, pretty effectively in those first few rounds, let's say rounds 1 through 4, just to keep that range. The thinking seemed to be bank those early rounds, maybe pick his spots to counter, especially looking for that straight right hand.
Okay, so pretty much standard, classic Plant opening. What about Renz's then? Was he just marching forward from second one?
No, not really, actually. Several sources pointed out that Resendiz started round 1 quite cautiously.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was definitely some respect being shown for Plant's experience, his skill set in that first round. It felt like, based on some commentary, he was maybe using that opening round mostly to gather data.
Just watching.
Yeah. Observe Plant's timing, see what he was doing, not overcommit too early. He didn't really see any significant power shots landed by either fighter in round 1. It was definitely a feel-out round before things started heating up.
All right, so Plant gets that cautious start from Resendiz. He tries to establish his rhythm, but the sources all seem to agree pretty emphatically that the tide started to turn as the rounds went on. How did Resendiz start to shift gears and take over the pace?
Right, this is where Resendiz really began implementing his core strategy.
Yeah.
The one that, ultimately defined the fight. As the rounds progressed, starting maybe noticeably around round 2, maybe round 3, he just increasingly took control of the pace.
Okay.
And the sources didn't just call it pressure, they often called it relentless, educated pressure.
Educated pressure. I like that term. What does that actually look like in the ring, based on the sources?
Well, it means he wasn't just, blindly chasing Plant around.
Right.
He was actively cutting off the ring, staying right in Plant's face, but doing it methodically, like increasing his activity level with purpose.
Step by step.
Yeah. And a really crucial element here, one that multiple sources pointed to as absolutely key, was introducing a consistent body attack. He started really sitting down on those shots, aiming for the ribs, the stomach.
Okay, the long game. Trying to wear him down.
That's exactly it. And the analysis is pretty consistent across the board. By the midpoint of the fight, Resendiz was clearly the one dictating the terms. You see a significant jump in his output, his aggression, especially highlighted in rounds 5 and 6, as this whole pressure strategy started to really build momentum.
And that buildup brings us right to what seems like every source agrees on the clear turning point of the whole fight. Round 6. What was it about that specific round that changed everything?
Round 6 was huge because up until then, Plant was still competitive, right? He was still trying to land his shot, still using his movement. But in this round, Resendiz's pressure didn't just build. It truly broke through. Sources describe it as the moment Resendiz started asserting a kind of dominance that didn't just score points on the cards, but visibly affected Plant. It dramatically shifted the whole dynamic of the fight.
So it wasn't just that he threw more punches in that round, it was more than volume?
No, exactly. The sources really emphasized that significance here was about impact. Resendiz unquestionably won the 6th round, and decisively so. He did it by landing the much more damaging blows and significantly rocking Plant.
Okay, was there one specific moment or punch that really defined that impact in round 6?
Yes, the defining moment, and it's highlighted in multiple write-ups, was Resendiz landing this powerful overhand right hand. The consensus was it clearly hurt Plant. One source even drew a direct comparison, interestingly, to a similar punch Canelo Alvarez used against Plant in their fight, noting how effective that specific shot was against him.
Jeez, okay. A familiar weapon causing problems. And he didn't back off after hurting him, I assume?
Not at all. That overhand right was just the start. It was followed by a really sustained attack from Resendiz' strong left hook combinations. He put Plant in serious trouble, had him completely on the defensive.
And Plant.
Well, in stark contrast, Plant's offense in round 6 was described by one source as absolutely muted. Just nothing coming back, really. That single round perfectly encapsulated Resendiz taking firm control.
And did that momentum just carry straight through?
Absolutely. The analysis notes that right after that dominant 6th round, Resendiz really took the bit between his teeth, as one piece phrased it. He basically took command and dictated the terms for the rest of the fight, rounds 7 through 12.
So, Resendiz takes control, dominates that second half. The sources spend a lot of time digging into why his strategy worked so well. What were the absolute key factors behind his victory, pulling from all this material?
Okay, yeah, looking across all the sources, several core factors just keep popping up as the explanation for why Resendiz won. The absolute cornerstone, as we've kind of been talking about, was that relentless, educated pressure itself.
Right.
It just fundamentally changed the fight. If it forced Plant to react constantly rather than initiate, always putting him on the back foot.
And applying that kind of pressure nonstop for 12 rounds,
Right.
that takes something specific, right? Basically.
Absolutely. And that's the next big point, conditioning and pacing. Highlighted again and again, sources use terms like excellent conditioning, having the gas tank. To keep up that high-pressure offense for the full 12 rounds, he just didn't fade, which is so crucial for that style to work.
Okay. And the body work we mentioned earlier, how critical was that really? Was it just adding up, or did it have a bigger effect?
It was described consistently as key. That consistent body attack wasn't just busy work. Sources said things like sitting down on those shots visibly wore Plant down, especially in the later rounds.
Ah, okay.
It definitely depleted his energy, probably made him less able to cope with the pressure coming upstairs too.
So it's a strategic approach, but perfectly executed physically.
Exactly right. It's framed in a few places as a classic example where conditioning and a well-executed pressure strategy overcame initial skill advantages. His plan was pretty clear. Break Plant down with relentless forward movement and body shots.
But it wasn't just pressure, was it? He also landed the punches that actually hurt.
That's the other crucial part. Beyond just forcing the action, landing damaging blows was critical. The pressure created the openings, right? And he capitalized most notably with that huge round 6 overhand right and the follow-up combinations that clearly hurt Plant.
Makes sense. What about the mental side of things for Resendiz?
Yeah, his mental fortitude and composure were noted too. He stayed calm. He stuck to his game plan even when Plant had some success early on, and he didn't seem to get discouraged. That kind of mental toughness is essential to keep applying that pressure when things aren't going perfectly.
And I think I saw some notes suggesting his own game evolved a bit too. It wasn't just one thing.
Yes, that's a good point. Sources mentioned his improved defense, things like better head movement, using an effective high guard more, and even his own jab evolving into what was sometimes called a power jab that actually helped back Plant up at times. So yeah, while pressure was definitely the foundation, it was clearly supported by other tactical improvements in his game.
Okay, so that paints a really clear picture of Resendiz's side of the successful execution of a tough strategy. Now, let's flip it. Let's look at Plant under that intense pressure. What did the sources point to as his main struggles? How did his approach kind of break down?
Well, as Resendiz's pressure ramped up, the analysis consistently showed that Plant's output tended to dip significantly. He just couldn't maintain the pace he maybe wanted to set early on.
And was that linked directly to his conditioning, you think?
Yes, the sources definitely felt his conditioning seemed to wane under that sustained pressure. He appeared to be fading, was a common observation, especially in those later rounds under that relentless assault. It was clearly taking a physical toll.
So the strategy itself wasn't adaptable enough mid-fight? He couldn't change things up?
That's what the sources suggest. He seemed to struggle to adjust his strategy effectively to cope with what Resendiz was bringing. His output dropped off, and instead of maybe using combinations to create space or deter Resendiz, he often resorted to single shots, which just weren't enough to keep Resendiz off him.
What about that jab? It was so sharp early, you said.
Yeah, but the sources noted it wasn't consistently used to nullify Resendiz's forward momentum as the fight wore on. He ended up allowing Resendiz to dictate the terms too often. and he was frequently forced into clinches, which, breaks his own rhythm and scoring opportunities.
And his movement, that seemed key early too.
Right, but when he was pressured hard, sources observed he often went straight back towards the ropes instead of angling out to the side, which is, a really crucial tactic against relentless pressure fighters. And maybe the most telling point, multiple sources highlighted that this whole pattern, fading down the stretch and struggling against consistent educated pressure, it's kind of a recurring pattern for Plant against certain types of fighters.
That recurring pattern really brings up the obvious next question, the rematch. Based purely on these sources we've looked at, how does that rematch potentially look? Who do the sources seem to favor?
Yeah, looking just at the analysis provided here, Armando Resendiz is generally seen as more likely to win a potential rematch.
Really? Okay.
The core reasoning cited is that he seems to have the fundamental style, the necessary conditioning, and that mental fortitude that these sources specifically say are required to break Plant down.
And I guess he has the psychological edge now too, right? Having done it once.
Absolutely. That's mentioned as a factor as well. For Plant to flip the script in a rematch, the sources all seem to agree he would need to make some significant adjustments, specifically to his conditioning and his strategy for dealing with that relentless pressure. And crucially, these sources describe making those necessary adjustments as a tall order, basically a very difficult task.
Okay, so boiling it down, what's the absolute critical factor that would likely determine the outcome of a potential rematch, according to these sources?
The sources really frame it as a direct clash of wills and styles. It comes down to Resendiz's ability to impose his will and maintain that relentless pressure versus Plant's ability to withstand that pressure and effectively counter it for 12 full rounds. That's the core dynamic.
That really sums it up. What key questions do the sources raise about that potential second fight? What are the big ifs?
Well, several pieces pose questions like, can Plant actually avoid fading in the later rounds this time? Does he have the conditioning now? Can he land something significant enough early on to disrupt Resendiz's rhythm and maybe make him hesitate with the pressure?
Right.
And maybe, will Resendiz now with the confidence from the win start the fight even stronger and faster than he did the first time?
Yeah, those are big questions. And if they were to fight again, where would the corners likely focus their training camps, just based on this analysis?
Okay, so for Plant's corner, the sources suggest the focus needs to be on elite conditioning, specifically designed for handling pressure, making strategic adjustments to better counter or deter that kind of attack, and really building mental toughness to maintain output when he's under fire.
Makes sense. And for Resendiz?
For Resendiz's corner, the focus would probably be on starting stronger and faster, maybe correcting that initial caution from round one last time, perhaps refining his pressure to be even smarter, more efficient, and of course, simply maintaining that peak physical condition that was so key to his win.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, what do the sources share about Caleb Plant's immediate plans? Right after this tough defeat, where does he go from here right now? Yeah,
based on his post-fight interview, which was quoted in the sources, Plant's immediate focus seems to be on regrouping and family. He stated he would get back with his team.
Taking some time away from the ring first, maybe.
Seems like it. He specifically mentioned his immediate plans were to go home to his family, spend time with his daughter, and his son's on the way.
Oh, wow. Fantastic news on the family front for him.
Yeah, definitely. And after that personal time, his quote was, "We'll regroup and we'll be back." So the intention to return is clear. The sources did make a point, though, that while a win here might have lined him up for a big fight, maybe someone like Jamal Charlo, Plant didn't explicitly state that was his next target after taking the loss. So the path forward is a bit unclear right now.
And there you have it, a pretty thorough deep dive into Caleb Plant versus Armando Resendiz, pulling everything straight from the sources you provided us with. I think the main takeaways are pretty compelling, right? Resendiz's victory was really built on that successful, relentless application of his educated pressure strategy.
Yeah, underpinned by just outstanding conditioning, that effective body work we talked about, and capitalizing on those pivotal moments, especially that round 6 breakthrough.
And it was a strategy that just seemed to visibly wear down Plant, who, according to the sources, really struggled to adapt his game and maintain his own output under that kind of sustained assault.
It truly highlights that strategic dynamic we kind of hinted at right at the start, how sometimes superior conditioning and a really well-executed pressure strategy can overcome initial skill advantages, especially when it's applied consistently over the full 12 rounds. And understanding these dynamics well, it's valuable for you, the listener, right? For seeing how different styles clash at the elite level, the absolute non-negotiable importance of having a Jeep gas tank, and just how challenging it is to make those adjustments mid-fight against a determined opponent who has a plan.
Absolutely. And it leaves us, I think, with a pretty thought-provoking question, one that sort of echoes through a lot of the sources we looked at today. Given Plant's documented struggles against pressure fighters in the past, and these sources calling the adjustments needed a tall order, is it possible that this style, relentless, educated pressure is simply a type of fight that Caleb Plant, despite all his considerable skill, is just fundamentally challenged to overcome consistently? Something for you to chew on as you think about what might be next for both fighters.